You are entering a zone where religion is banished. Talk of Jesus, theories, scripture, and the esoteric is the forefront. Can you handle it? Alright, so try number 2 today. Yesterday just did not go. I was on Wi-Fi and it did not work at all, so we are just going to resume. We're going to basically restart, not resume. So that was my fault. Alright, as usual, don't forget to check out the website, www.thegothicmystic.com. If you're interested in supporting this project, ministry, whatever you want to call it, podcast, head over to patreon.com/thegothicmystic. Where's that button now? Alright. How are you, Kenny?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad that we got that stuff figured out. Or
Yeah.
I got that, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I'm glad the storms seem to be past now.
True.
I was having internet problems yesterday too, so.
Looks like YouTube is still screwing up a little bit, which is weird. I don't understand that. You know what? I'm just gonna end the YouTube thing and continue on Facebook, and I'll upload it later.
Sounds good.
YouTube issues. Yay.
So,
there we go.
while you're doing that, I guess I'll give a little intro.
Yeah, good idea. That way I can kind of get things.
Chapter 89, and where we left off, the 4 angels had come out of heaven and gathered up all of the fallen angels and threw them into the abyss. So, short and sweet. So now, in chapter 89, we're continuing in the vision, and this is the vision that Enoch had about all the generations of the whole world. Excuse me.
And it is pretty long, so that's why we decided to just make this chapter an episode in itself.
Yes, it is quite extensive, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. All right, and here we go, chapter 89. And one of those 4 went to that white bullock and taught him a mystery while he was trembling. He was born a bullock and became a man, and he made for himself a large vessel and lived in it. And 3 bullocks lived with him in that vessel, and it was covered over above them. And I again raised my eyes toward heaven and saw a high roof and 7 sluices to it. And those sluices emptied much water into a yard. And that water began to swell and to be lifted above the land and caused that yard to disappear until all the land was covered with water. Excuse me. And the water and the darkness and the fog increased over it. And as I looked at the height of this water was elevated over that yard, and it emptied over the yard and stood on the earth. And all the bullocks which were in the yard were collected, so that I immediately saw how they sank down and came to naught and were destroyed in that water. But that vessel swam on the water, and all the bullocks and elephants and camels and asses on the earth sank down, and all the animals, and I was not able to see them, and they were unable to come out, but were destroyed and sank down unto the abyss. And again I saw in the vision till those sluices were put away from that high roof, and the fountains of the earth dried up, and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run into these till the earth became uncovered. But that vessel reached the earth, and the darkness retreated, and it became light.
Alright, and that's where I interrupted yesterday, which I will do again. I don't remember exactly what I said, so I'm just gonna try to kind of summarize. Obviously, this is the flood. Me or Kenny couldn't couldn't really determine exactly what the symbolisms were showing, but we're kind of taking a wild guess at like the different cattle that was shown for Enoch. It's basically the clean and unclean. Like to him, like trying to think back and like kind of think how he would have seen things. The elephants and the other stuff will pretty much be wild animals to him versus what was the other ones? Like the cattle would be like domesticated in a way.
Domesticated, yeah. That's good.
So that's kind of how we're assuming is, and I also explained yesterday before everything went haywire that a lot of people don't understand why why in dreams or visions, especially for over a long period of time, everything is like shown in just weird symbolism, and it's really difficult to portray and kind of give example of events over a long period of time as a literal thing. I've been working on trying to figure out my own dreams and other people's dreams for a few years now, and that's kind of the conclusion I have come to, like in the understanding of like the Father giving me the bigger picture.
And a lot of it, if I could interject for just a second,
yeah.
A lot of it is he does use a lot of symbolism, but the symbolism is recognizable as something real, and it's distinguishable, and it's undeniably one interpretation. All prophecy is, when it happens, you'll know it happened. That kind of thing. Like if it happens right in front of you, you'll know that that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. And
that's the spirit that is, that I can't even remember which book of the Bible it says that, but all prophecy is to not open to multiple interpretations, but only one. Like if it's a prophecy, it means something specific.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the one that you're talking about too, and I can't think of it off the top of my head. But yeah, that's kind of how I've more or less learned to understand things, is like with the different symbolisms and like the long-term thing. It has to be used as a summary, or like basically a summary of things over a course of time, and it's up to us whenever we receive these things to seek the Father out. Like, all right, Lord, you gave this to me. You used like, my understanding of things. What do you mean by this stuff? And so, of course, now we're looking at what Enoch wrote down, and it was hidden for what, few millennia.
Yeah, and it was definitely. Well, I don't think it was really, actually, though. I think it was available pretty widely, and then it fell into seclusion.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because I believe like Jesus had it whenever he had access to it, because I think he referred to it, and even Jude and Paul referred to Enoch. But
yeah, and it was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why Americans started talking about it in the 50s.
Yeah.
Or whenever that was, whenever those were found.
Yeah.
America pretty much had written it off until then, and still don't fully buy into it.
Because it's so new, that's why.
Right. Even though it's so old.
True. Alright. I will read from 8 until whenever, then we can kind of go from there. That cool? Alright. Verse 8. But that white bull, which had become a man, came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him, and one of those 3 was white, like a bull, and one of them was red as blood, and one black. And that white bull departed from them, and they began to bring out beasts of the field, and birds, so that there arose different... What is that word? Genera? Is that the same one that's shown for you?
It says varied diversity.
I'm okay with that. Lions, tigers, and bears. Oh, I'm just kidding. Lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens, and among them was born a white bull. And they began to bite one another, but that white bull which was born among them fathered a wild ass, and a white bull with it. And the wild asses multiplied, and that bull which was born from him fathered a black wild boar, and a white sheep. And the former fathered many boars, but the sheep gave birth to 12 sheep. And then those 12 sheep had grown, and gave up one of them to the asses, and the asses again gave that sheep to the wolves, and that sheep grew up among the wolves. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves, and they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. Alright, that was one full page, so I think we should probably divide that one up, because that has a lot of information there.
So, I guess I'll start.
Okay.
So, at first, it's talking about, obviously, Ham, Shem, and Japheth are the red, black, and white bulls. And then that one, the white bull, went away from them. I think that's talking about when Noah died. They all began to sin again. Didn't take very long for the world to once again not have the good people, which is the bulls so far. But it turned into hogs and falcons and vultures. I mean, all sorts of, different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And you can look at and see across the whole world, there are various cultures and different kinds of people everywhere. And that happened before at the Tower of Babel. They were all split, and separated. But they were all kind of in their people groups already anyway, I think. I don't think families were broke apart at the Tower of Babel. Families were sent apart. And I don't think it's necessarily anything significant about the animals that are picked. You might see some of the animals on flags in countries across Europe and Asia. Who knows what significance they hold to different cultures, but I don't think anything's really specific here about that, just not being the white bulls anymore. Then we do see that one white bull was picked, and that's Abraham. And that white bull went off and had a wild ass and a white bull. That's Ishmael, and then Isaac. And the wild ass went off and increased. That's backed up in Genesis 2 or whatever. And then that bull had the black boar and the white sheep. Well, that's the first sheep, and that is the father of all the sheep. So that's Israel or Jacob. And the other is Esau. And then the sheep is Israel from here on out. Grow up among the wolves and many, many herds of sheep, Israelites. So, I forget which verse you stopped at.
I read through 13.
Through 13 or 14?
13. 14 starts the new page for me.
I think we have a number difference.
I'm not surprised.
You started at 9 in mine, but that's cool.
Interesting. You can resume at this point. Probably the easiest way of going back and forth.
All right. Did you have any other thing to add to that? I thought it was
Nope,
pretty
that was
straight.
yeah. I understood all that.
Okay.
It wasn't until later on, whenever I started losing, like whenever I was reading this thing, not reading, listening to it on Audible, I think it was. I followed up into a certain point, and then at the point I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about now.
Yeah. Well, and I guess okay. So we left off. It's the sheep and the wolves. The wolves is actually Egypt. It's Israel in Egypt. Is what that is talking about to begin with. So then chapter 15 or verse 15 in my book, 14 in yours. It's funny, they're different numbers, but all the words have been there still. So, and the wolves began to fear and oppressed them till they finally destroyed their young and threw their young into a stream of much water. And these sheep began to cry aloud on account of their young for the Lord. And a sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses. And I saw the sheep, and as they lamented and cried and asked their Lord with all their power, till that Lord of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from the high abode, and came and looked after them. And he called to that sheep which had escaped from the wolves, and spoke with it concerning the wolves, that it should counsel them not to touch the sheep. And that sheep went to the wolves by the voice of the Lord, and another sheep met that sheep and went with it. And these two came together to the abode of the wolves, and spoke with them, and admonished them that henceforth they should not touch the sheep. And then I saw the wolves, and how they exceedingly oppressed the sheep with all their power. And the sheep cried aloud. And their Lord came to the sheep, and began to beat those wolves. And the wolves began to lament, but the sheep became quiet. And from then on did not cry. And I saw the sheep till they had gone away from the wolves, and the wolves were blinded as to their eyes, and those wolves went out that they might follow the sheep with all their power. And the Lord of the sheep went with them, leading them, and all the sheep followed them. And his face was shining, and their appearance terrible, and this appearance terrible and sublime. But the wolves commenced to follow those sheep till they reached them in a sea of water. And this sea of water was divided, and the water stood from this side and from that before their faces. And their Lord leading them stood between them and the wolves. And as those wolves did not yet see the sheep, they went into the middle of the sea of water, and the wolves followed, and the sheep ran after them into the sea of water. And when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned, that they might flee from before his face. But this sea of water gathered itself together, suddenly took again its own character, and the water swelled and rose till it covered those wolves.
Okay, let's interpret, since we already know what this means.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna fast forward and then we can go back a little bit. So the part where the sea and you know them crying or whatever, that is clearly Moses, and you know, well, actually I'll go back a little bit. Them crying was basically the 400 years in captivity in Egypt. What? What was the little bit before then?
They didn't start crying until the wolves started throwing their sheep in.
Yeah.
They were killing their young. Started getting scared of them.
Yeah, so at one point, I'm not sure at what point they became captured.
It was like a turning point, I guess. Like when Joseph died, all of a sudden they just weren't protected anymore. They were never captured, welcomed in, and they did most of the work for Egypt, but then they just became oppressed by the natives.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I remember that now. Okay. Because I remember in Genesis, whoever the leader was of Egypt got scared of them because they were increasing in number so quickly.
Yes, they were probably outpopulated the Egyptians and out. I don't know what the word would be, but had more possessions than them.
Yeah.
Or whatever. We're richer than them, and doing great. So envious of that.
Yeah, and so whenever Joseph died, they clearly didn't have someone as wise as Joseph at that point, and they just kind of fell into that oppression.
Yeah. Or when that Pharaoh died, I think that's actually what the Bible said. When a new Pharaoh that didn't remember Joseph came to power, they were scared of the Israelites.
Yeah. And of course, so that was whenever they began lamenting. Moses was born, and God took him for the 40 years, brought him back, delivered him, and the water, the splitting of the water, and then whenever it came back, I find it interesting, and I don't know why, I like how it says, where was it? We can flee from the face, but the sea gathered itself together and became as it had been created. So you can clearly see the separation, then just like how it was before. All right, and then we stopped at 26, if I remember correctly. That's that, at least in my book, it's 26. So I will read another page, and then we can go over that.
All right.
And if anyone, for anyone who is listening, if you have any questions, throw them at us, because I know this is a lot of information. That's exactly why I say it's all paraphrased or summary, because there's so much information over a period of time. 26. And I watched until all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished and were drowned. But the sheep escaped from that water and went out into the wilderness, where there was no water and no grass. And they began to open their eyes and see, and saw the Lord of the sheep pasturing them and giving them water and grass, and that sheep going and leading them. And the sheep ascended, and I'm not going to go there, never mind. And the sheep ascended to the summit of that high rock, and the Lord of the sheep sent it to them. And after that I saw the Lord of the sheep, who stood before them, and his appearance was great and terrible and majestic. And all those sheep saw him and were afraid before his face. And they all feared and trembled because of him. And they cried to that sheep which was among them, We are not able to stand before our Lord, or to behold him. And that sheep which led them again ascended to the summit of that rock. But the sheep began to be blinded and to wander from the way which he had showed them, but that sheep did not realize it. And the Lord of the sheep was very angry with them, and that sheep discovered it, and went down from the summit of the rock, and came to the sheep, and found the greatest part of them blinded and fallen away. And when they saw it, they feared and trembled at its presence, and desired to return to their folds. And that sheep took their other sheep with it, and came to those sheep which had fallen away, and began to slay them. That semicolon over here. And the sheep feared its presence, and thus that sheep brought back those sheep that had fallen away, and they returned to their folds. Okay. To me, it's common sense. I just enjoy the way that it's worded. It can get a little confusing if you have no idea what you're listening to either. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah, it can. If you're not familiar with the story of the Bible, and the history and Genesis, then
I want to make one little comment about the English language that really annoys me.
Okay.
That the word sheep can be used for both plural and singular.
Right.
Because if you're not paying attention, you're like, the crux is
Okay,
talking
right.
about.
Talking about one sheep or many sheep?
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
Here, you can go ahead and interpret this one.
That sheep or these sheep? Well, I mean, it's like I said, pretty straightforward. They went to the mountain. Shoot, I can't think of the name of it now, but it's over in Saudi Arabia. It's called Jabal al-Lawz. If you want to look it up on Google, Lawz, which ironically enough means almond in Arabic. So there's that, and it's a almond tree that was the staff for Aaron that was cut from there too. So not only does the almond correlate to law in from Arabic to English, but it also connects the mountain where the law was given to us in English.
Interesting. I was not aware of that.
But that is in the land of the wild asses, the land of Ishmael's descendants.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's. I still enjoy how all this was seen like years, like hundreds of years before.
Right, and it's just a quick overview, and using animals as what he's showing him the vision through. I don't think that it necessarily depends on the person's understanding at all that's seeing it, because he's just looking at animals. I don't know how much of it he understood. He just copied it, passed it on.
Yeah.
But of course, this was the guy that was shown everything, so he probably didn't know exactly what it all meant to do.
He probably had a decent idea. He's like, yeah.
Right.
What's really interesting though is because to me it seems like, and I call them minor. I don't know whether or not they are minor, like events, whatever. But it even covered, whenever Moses went up to the mountain, he covered the fact that he came down and the sheep couldn't stand to see his face because it was so bright, because he had been in the Father's presence.
Yeah, and it also covered how they went astray, and some of them died because of it.
Yeah. That's just interesting. Alright. I stopped at 34. I don't know what verse that was to you.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, they trembled before his face and desired to return to their poles.
Yeah.
Okay. So, moving on, 35 in my book. And that sheep took other sheep with it and came to those. Oh, wait. No, that's the last one you wrote. Yeah. See? Okay, 36 in my. There we go. And I saw there in the vision till that sheep became a man, and built the Lord of the sheep a house, and placed all the sheep in that house. And I saw till that sheep that had met the sheep. Okay. I saw till that sheep that had met the sheep, which led the sheep, reposed. And I saw till all the large sheep were destroyed, and small ones arose in their places, and they came to a pasture and approached a stream of water. And this sheep which led them and which became a man was separated from them and reposed in death. And all the sheep sought it and cried over it exceedingly. So I guess Moses, since somebody actually became a man, I should stop and point it out, I guess. The first man in all of this was Noah, and the second man was Moses.
And we may not even figure out why they became like in the symbolism of man.
Right.
That's still kind of mind-boggling. It's like, why?
Right. I don't know if I've even noticed that before necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think I whenever you mention it, sure, I probably did hear it, but I'm like, what, really? Type thing.
But I mean, great leader, I guess, of
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
maybe, because they were the two chosen people to lead God's people, maybe.
there's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Abraham didn't, but Moses did, so that's kind of weird.
Interesting point.
Anyway,
Yeah.
okay. And I saw till they became quiet from their crying over this sheep, and they crossed that stream of water, and there always arose other sheep that led them in the place of those which had departed and led them. Something just stopped me. He built a house for the Lord too. Like, he was a leader of worship too. So Noah taught the first way of worship in the New World that was godly, and then Moses taught the second. Maybe that's why they were meant.
And Abraham did not, from what I can remember, because he was the very beginning. So there wasn't really a place of worship to create.
Family, this is how we live.
Yeah.
This is a way of life. It's not we need to sacrifice these things for these reasons type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham was justified by faith, not works.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting.
It is viable.
And I know that Noah did teach his kids to sacrifice just like Adam did. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. You're supposed to give unto God.
I agree.
So, okay. I feel like I should move on. Okay. So, and I saw the sheep until they came into a good place and into a pleasant and glorious land. And I saw these sheep till they were satisfied. But the house stood among them in the beautiful land. And sometimes their eyes were opened, and sometimes they were blinded, till other sheep arose and led them, and conducted them all back. And their eyes were opened, and the dogs and the foxes and wild boars began to devour those sheep, until sheep arose, a buck in their midst, which led them. And this buck began to butt those dogs and those foxes and those wild boars from both sides, till he had destroyed them all. And that sheep had its eyes open, and saw this buck, which was among the sheep, departing from his honor, and began to butt those sheep, and to tramp on them, and to walk unseemly. And the Lord of the sheep sent that sheep to another sheep, and exalted it to become a buck, and to lead the sheep in the place of that sheep which had deserted his honor. Okay. And it went to it and spoke to it alone, and elevated it to become a buck, and made it the prince and leader of the sheep. But during all that time, those dogs oppressed the sheep, and the first buck pursued the second buck, and the second buck arose and fled before its face. And I saw those dogs cast down the first buck, and that second buck arose and led the smaller sheep, and this buck begat many sheep, and reposed in death. And a small sheep became the buck in its place, and was the prince and leader of those sheep. And those sheep grew and increased, and the dogs and the foxes and the wild boars were afraid and fled before it. And that buck butted and killed all the wild beasts, and those wild beasts had no more power among the sheep, and never robbed them of anything. And that house became great and broad, and a large tower was built on that house of the Lord of the sheep for those sheep. And the house was low, but the tower was high and broad. And the Lord of the sheep stood on that tower, and they placed a full table before him.
Okay, hang on. Let's go back. Okay, so we could clearly see that that was basically the succession of like Moses dying, and like the commentary on here is the two spies being sent out, but then we could also see where the place of the judges, the introduction of the judges and the kings being introduced.
I think I don't know if it skipped over the judges, but it seems like the kings are the bucks, not the because the first buck would be the first buck would have been the first king before David. She was his name, Saul.
Mhm.
As Saul went bad, he lost his honor in the eyes of the Lord. And then the second buck rose up, but then his son that became a buck is the one that built the temple. Does he use buck or ram in your?
He used ram. That
Okay.
kind of threw me off a little bit until I realized what
think that's-
word they used for yours.
Right. I think that just means it has horns.
Yeah.
In my translation, it's the male sheep that has the horns is called a buck.
That makes sense. Now, I'm kind of wondering why they didn't use a different animal when it comes to the Nephilim, or in this case the other generations of the Nephilim. Whenever whenever the spies went out and they
That's
said,
the foxes and boars and dogs.
yeah, but
right?
those are around the same size of animals though, and not like something larger.
Well, I mean, it's all symbolism.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kind of wondering, like, I wonder why not.
Yeah. Even now is when you would expect elephants and giraffes, but
Exactly. Well, it's like whatever.
right. That's why it's just not necessarily symbolic, but I mean, a lot can be said for that. Dogs. What are dogs? Dogs are nasty animals. If they're left to themselves, they'll even return and eat their own vomit. I mean, that's gross. That's what God thinks about those people. Whichever ones he's talking about. Foxes, shoot, they sneak in and eat your babies. That's what foxes do. So, wild boars, man, they just make a mess out of anything, and they'll eat anything, even humans. So, maybe
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. I think you stopped to me at 47. Repeat the last verse you read.
I don't. I went back up, and that second buck arose and led the smaller sheep, and this buck begat many sheep and died, and a small sheep became a buck in its place and was the prince and leader of those sheep. Yeah, you can start there. That's 49.
Okay. I'm gonna, yeah.
Oh no, I read further down.
Yeah.
Because that's the house that buck built was the temple, and then placed a full table before him. That's what I said.
Okay. So that means I will resume at 49 then. Right. To me, it's 49 at least. And again, I saw those sheep, and that they again erred and went many ways, and forsook that their house, and the Lord of the sheep called some from among the sheep, and sent them to the sheep. But the sheep began to slay them, and one of them was saved, and was not slain. And it sped away, and cried aloud over the sheep, and they sought to slay it. But the Lord of the sheep saved it from the sheep, and brought it up to me, and caused it to live there. And many other sheep many other sheep he sent to those sheep to testify to them and lament over them. And after that I saw that when they forsook the house of the Lord, and his tower, they fell away entirely, and their eyes were blinded. And I saw the Lord of the sheep, how he worked much slaughter among them and their herds, until those sheep invited that slaughter, and betrayed his place. And he gave them over into the hands of the lions and tigers and wolves and hyenas, and into the hand of the foxes, and to all the wild beasts. And those wild beasts began to tear in pieces those sheep. And I saw that he forsook their house and their tower, and gave them all into the hand of the lions to tear and devour, into all the hand of the wild beasts. And I began to cry aloud with all my power, and to appeal to the Lord of the sheep, because the sheep were being devoured by all the wild beasts. Let's see, I'll read a little bit more. And he remained unmoved, though he saw it, and rejoiced that they devoured and swallowed and robbed, and left them to be devoured in the hand of all the beasts. And he called 70 shepherds, and gave those sheep to them, that they might pasture them. And he spoke to the shepherds and their companions, and let each individual let each individual of you pasture the sheep from now on, and everything that I shall command you that do you. All right.
Okay, that was a good
Yeah.
place to
Yeah, because I want your opinion on those shepherds, because this is where I start getting lost.
Okay,
So
well,
we can
let's
kind
back
of
up a little
resume
bit.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, let's back up a little bit. Okay, so the temple was built, and then the people started going astray again.
Yeah.
And then you have your prophets, and even the one prophet that God took up to him.
Correct.
Who was that? Elijah.
Mm-hmm.
And then other sheep, that's the sheep that talked to the sheep. They weren't anything special. They were just average Israelites. The only difference was they listened to God and then went out and said what he wanted them to say. That's probably why they're sheep, just like the other sheep. And
Yeah, makes
leaders.
sense.
They weren't given titles. They were actually killed for everything they said. So, which is why the one sheep wanted to go up to heaven so bad. And I think we get our answer about which nation was which, and I think the foxes are the Philistines, because they're the one that the Israelites didn't kill, and they're still around. God said kill everybody in the land, and the Philistines, they never did kill them all. So that's probably that. Then you see the tigers, wolves, and jackals, and foxes, and then all the wild beasts, because all the nations, that's where Israel was scattered to eventually.
Yeah.
So let's see. And the tower was given to the lions. So I guess that would be Babylon.
I didn't think about that.
That would be Jerusalem, taking over Jerusalem. And I guess that must be the point when God met with his council, 70 shepherds. That's the angels that were set over them to take turn ruling over Israel.
That makes sense. Hence, and that's the divine.
That's the 70 generations that Daniel had prophesied as punishment or whatever, whoever that was, however that worked out. 70 generations, one angel shepherd for each. And yeah, that's exactly what he told them. Whatever I tell you to do, do. And continue from that.
The author actually thinks that it's 70 different nations and not generations.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting different perspectives, though.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on how you interpret the council of whatever.
Yeah. Whenever you mentioned the council, I was actually thinking more of the divine council. You know, with whenever
The Elohim, council of the Elohim.
Yeah.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, I want to make sure I was on the same page, and that's whenever they. Yeah, we can go there. So Michael Heiser, he actually thinks that was another kind of a falling away. How they were each area of mankind was given to the sons of man, but then eventually they kind of took it upon themselves to basically kind of take the worship onto themselves rather than give it to the Father.
Sure, that could be as well, but I mean the council is one for every nation. It just happens to be 70 of them, right? 70 nations. Well, some of those nations were just ordered to be destroyed by the Lord, so those angels are without a job. And not to mention the other, I don't know if it would just be territorial or if it would be stick to the people no matter where they go.
Yeah.
I tend to think that Michael is still watching over all believers, no matter what country they live in, if that's what his task was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
weren't we also theorizing that that Israel was Michael's?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Israel was, Michael was definitely one of the angels specifically tasked over Israel.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
But it's a whole army of angels. And that's the other thing. So army of angels, 2/3 of them are good, 1/3 of them fell.
Yeah.
Well, that's more than 200.
A little bit. Just a little more.
Those are the ones that were locked up. 200 were locked up.
Yeah.
Okay. So my book, we're actually on 60 now. I think we had another verse slip.
Yeah, and that puts us at 58, I believe. So I'll resume at 58. All right. And I will deliver them over to you, duly numbered, and tell you which of them are to be destroyed, and them you will destroy. And he gave over to them those sheep. And he called another and spoke to them, Observe and mark everything that the shepherds will do to those sheep, for they will destroy more of them than I have commanded, and every access from the destruction which will be done through the shepherds, record how many they destroy according to my command, and how many according to their own caprice. Record against every individual shepherd all the destruction he effects. So let me go back real quick. So I find it interesting how someone in heaven, the Father gives a specific job, like, now you watch over these shepherds and take count of who they kill, whether it's per my command or against in their own discretion.
Well, that's yeah. I mean that the Watchers have Watchers.
Yeah, which is interesting.
The Watchers have Watchers that watch them.
And see, now that I actually have the understanding, this part is making somewhat more sense. But I'm kind of curious as we continue on. All right, so 61. And read out before me by number how many they destroy and how many they deliver over for destruction, that I may have this as a testimony against them, and know every deed of the shepherds, that I may comprehend and see what they do, whether or not they abide by my command which I have commanded them. But they shall know it, and you shall not declare it to them, nor admonish them, but only record against each of an individual all the destruction which the shepherds effect, each in his time, and lay it all before me. Excuse me. And I saw unto those shepherds pastured, in their season, and they began to slay and destroy more than they were bidden, and they delivered those sheep into the hand of the lions, and the lions and tigers ate and devoured the greater part of those sheep, and the wild boars ate along with them, and they burned that tower and demolished that house. And I became very sorrowful over that tower, because that house of the sheep was demolished, and afterwards I was unable to see if those sheep entered that house. Alright, let's stop there. See, it's actually looking like the one of the other theories of the 7 shepherds having different times along the linear timeline. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's he's shown it's like a multi-level.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because each of the shepherds pastures in its own time, but right now it's just still talking about the destruction of Israel by Babylon and disbursement of Israel amongst all the nations.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Okay, so this just struck me here. We got the 70, we got the 70 shepherds for the 70 different 70 generations. Isn't it Daniel that speaks of 70 generations?
Yes.
Or where was I going with that? Where was I going with that, Father? I wonder if it would change the narrative or the understanding of the prophecy of Daniel if you put in this portion into Daniel. Because I don't have a full understanding. I know I have a basic understanding of the whole thing, the whole eschatological part of Daniel. But I wonder what would happen if you threw in this part into that. I don't know how well versed in the different theories of eschatology you are.
Well, I'm familiar with a lot. I don't know which one I personally subscribe to, because none of them really ring all the way true to me.
Yeah. But that just kind of struck my head a little bit.
I think Daniel more closely resembles Revelation than anything that I've read here.
Yeah.
Other than the 70, that's just they complement each other, back each other up on the 70 generations.
Yeah, that right there, like, kind of makes me wonder, like, whenever the time comes for me to actually dive back into that stuff, I'm kind of wondering if that changes any narrative in the theory, if that makes sense. Or if it just kind of more cements it.
Yeah, I think it just kind of solidifies it.
Yeah, I'll have to remember to go back to this one whenever I am going through that again.
Yeah.
Alright. I think I stopped at 65, so that should mean that you're at 67 in your book.
So the last thing you read was that burned that tower and demolished that house.
Yeah, and he was very sorrowful.
Yeah. And I mourned a great deal over that tower, because that house of the sheep was demolished. And after that, I could no longer see those sheep, whether they entered that house. And the shepherds and their companions delivered over those sheep to all the wild beasts to devour them. And each one of them received in his time a certain number, and each one the other wrote down in a book how many he destroyed. And each one killed and destroyed more than was ordered. And I began to cry and to lament exceedingly concerning those sheep. And in the vision I saw that scribe, as he wrote each one that was destroyed by those shepherds on each day, and brought up and opened and showed the whole book to the Lord of the sheep, everything that had been done, and everyone that each single one had removed, and every one that they had handed over for destruction. And the book was read before the Lord of the sheep, and he took the book in his hand and read it and sealed it and laid it down. And after that I saw that shepherds pastured 12 hours, and behold, 3 of those sheep turned around and came and entered and began to build everything that was demolished of the house. But the wild boars attempted to hinder them, and they could not. And they again began to build as before, and put up that tower, as it was called, the high tower. And they again began to place a table before that tower, and all the bread was on it was unclean and not pure. And concerning all this, the sheep were blinded as to their eyes, and did not see. And the shepherds likewise, and a great many, were delivered to their shepherds for destruction, and they trod on the sheep with their feet and devoured them. And the Lord of the sheep remained quiet till all the sheep were scattered in the field, and mixed themselves with them, and did not save them from the hands of the wild beasts. And he who wrote the book brought it to the houses of the Lord of the sheep, and showed it and read it, and petitioned him on their account, and asked while showing him all the deeds of the shepherds, and testifying before him against all the shepherds. And he took the book and laid it beside him, and departed. That is the end of chapter 89.
Okay, so what do you think this last little bit is saying?
Well, it's coming to where Jerusalem is being rebuilt. They're coming out of Babylon, coming out of the captivity, but they still don't know God. Their eyes are blind. It's the second temple period. And yeah.
How many generations was it between the whenever they were in Egypt to the time of Jesus? Was there 70? I thought there was only 14.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Because I'm kind of thinking that, like, if there, I don't, and I could be completely off on this, but it doesn't seem like there'd be 70 generations from the time of Elijah, basically, the judges and the prophets, to the second temple. That would kind of tell me that the portion, the last few verses that you read is possibly our time, maybe.
I don't think so. And the only reason I really don't think so is because we haven't even gotten to Jesus in the prophecy yet.
Interesting.
That's really just everything we've gotten to.
Well, that, assuming, then that would probably make the 70 shepherds more of a one, like all at once, rather than one after the other.
Well, let me read the first verse of chapter 90.
Okay.
I'm gonna go into it, but it'll put your mind at ease.
Okay.
And I saw to the time when 36 shepherds thus pastured. So I don't think we're even there yet. I'm not even halfway, right at halfway through the timeline, I guess, of the 70 generations.
Interesting.
But now, if you're going,
okay, so we were basically shown the entire time for the 70, and then so in the 90 we're gonna be backtracking a bit. We were shown like entire synopsis of, okay, this is what's gonna happen with the 70 generations, but let's go back to look at the 35th one.
Well, it's like maybe each one of them, because the angels, they're eternal or whatever, right?
Yeah.
not really eternal. Only God's eternal. Because angels have a beginning.
Yeah.
So they might be. I mean, they're immortal, I guess.
That's what. Yeah, that's what you said when this past weekend. I'm like, oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the 70 could have started at the Tower of Babel.
True. Which makes the most sense.
If he's being shown everything from a big overview, that might just be the time that it was put in.
Yeah.
Because it didn't add anything to the understanding of the story until then.
Mm-hmm.
They're already in place. They're already doing their job. And maybe each one has a turn over a generation of Israel. At the same time as their other stuff. But also Israel has been dispersed among all 70. So maybe each one is just watched more closely in how they deal with Israel through the whole time.
Those are definitely different, interesting perspectives. Huh.
Yeah, I don't try to box myself in.
Yeah, well, I would not even thought about that. Interesting. I like that though. They kind of, but maybe we'll get a different idea, better idea as we continue on though too.
Right, but I definitely know that so far in the prophecy parts, this is the second temple period.
Okay.
Where we're ending off right now.
True. All right, and we will resume at 90 next week. And I'm enjoying this because you helped me get a better idea of that last little bit. Because like I said before, whenever I was listening to it before, I'm like, the crap is all that mean?
Right. Yeah, and it's hard to put it all together.
Yeah.
It's not. It sounds easy, but it's only easy when somebody explains it, I guess, in the right way.
Yeah. True.
It's like Philip was traveling with the Ethiopian, and the Ethiopian said, "Man, what does this even mean?" Philip said, "Oh, well, it means this," and he's like, "Duh, that's so easy. Okay, let's do it now, and I'm going to go teach everybody that back in Ethiopia."
Yeah. True. Cool. All right, I appreciate it tonight, and for anyone who is watching or listening, we apologize for the confusion and the technical difficulties yesterday, but we got the stuff figured out. So stay tuned for next week as we continue, and we'll be in chapter 90, and we only got 18 more chapters to go.
Yeah, something like that.
Cool. And I will, since I know we probably still got another month-ish to go, but I want to hear what everyone's thoughts are of what we should read next. I'm thinking Jubilee, but I'm up for taking a vote to see what else everyone else is thinking. I know that was confusing there, but whatever. Yeah.
Sounded good.
Yeah. But as usual, check out the website, www.thegothicmystic.com. If you're interested in supporting this, head over to patreon.com/thegothicmystic. Until next time, I hope everyone has a good week and stay safe out there.